That morning, I arrived at my parents' house for our family getaway, but all I found was a golden retriever. Shortly afterward, my phone rang. "We're leaving on a cruise. Watch over the dog." My sister giggled beside them. "Don't worry, we'll return with a special present." When they came back, they stepped inside and were struck with pure terror. Carol Hamilton stared out the window, mentally bracing herself for the day ahead. Despite it being a quiet Sunday morning, she couldn't resist checking her work emails on her smartphone. 15 years into her career as a real estate consultant, her reputation was rock solid. Her clients admired her razor-sharp analysis and decisive approach, and her name had become synonymous with excellence in the Los Angeles market. From the bedroom, her husband Michael caught sight of her and smiled warmly. "Are you all set for today?" he asked. Carol simply shrugged, replying with her trademark dry wit. "It's going to be a perfect family day with Mom, Dad, and Diana." Michael, ever perceptive, understood the undertone in her voice. Stepping closer, he draped his arm around her shoulder. They had chosen not to have children, preferring to focus on their careers and savor the freedom that came with it. Yet Carol's family, especially her mother Martha, could never quite accept that decision. "Just look at Diana," Martha would often say. Diana, for years Carol's junior, had always been the ideal daughter, working at a travel agency, obedient and never missing a family gathering. In contrast, Carol was branded a workaholic, often absent at these events due to her professional commitments. "How long will you be out today?" Michael inquired. "Until evening at the latest," Carol replied honestly. "I have an important meeting tomorrow." Michael pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "You'll do great. I'll be home for dinner." As Michael left for his day at work, Carol's thoughts drifted to her father, George. Now retired, he spent his days quietly tending his garden and fishing, always a reserved man who lingered in Martha's shadow. Though proud of Carol's achievements, he rarely showed it, never in front of his wife or Diana. Growing up, Carol had naturally assumed the role of the responsible one, looking after little Diana while their parents were busy, excelling in school and handling household chores. Her own dreams, however, were always secondary to the family's needs. Turning onto Sunset Boulevard, Carol entered the upscale neighborhood where her childhood home still stood. The two-story residence boasted a spacious yard and old-fashioned charm inherited from her grandparents. Few people knew that legally the house was jointly owned by Carol and her parents, a detail arranged long ago by her grandfather to ensure a smooth transfer to the next generation. To Carol, though, it was simply the home where her parents lived and managed their affairs. Content with her career and life, she nonetheless felt a sporadic twinge of ownership as she parked in the driveway. Today's family trip had been meticulously planned by Martha weeks earlier to strengthen familial bonds. Though Carol had inwardly sighed at the idea, she had agreed as promised. Before she could ring the doorbell, a chorus of enthusiastic barks erupted from inside Buddy, the family's golden retriever, eagerly greeting her arrival. A small smile tugged at her lips. Perhaps the day wouldn't be so dreadful after all. Stepping inside, she called out, "I'm here." Yet no one answered. Buddy dashed out from the hallway to greet her, his tail wagging energetically, but an eerie silence pervaded the house. Checking her watch at 8:15, Carol recalled that Martha had promised on the phone that everyone would gather at 8 o'clock for breakfast before setting off on their trip. Peeking into the living room, she noticed soft morning sunlight highlighting antique figurines that Martha cherished. However, there was no sign of movement toward the kitchen, only a half-full, still warm pot of coffee on the counter, evidence that someone had been there not long ago. Buddy trailed behind her as she wandered upstairs, his soft whining a constant reminder of his presence. In her parents' bedroom, the door stood ajar. The bed was neatly made, yet Martha's makeup lay scattered on the vanity, a rare, disordered sight for her usually immaculate mother. Diana's room, the adjacent guest space, was similarly empty. Unease began to creep in. Had an emergency occurred? And if so, why hadn't anyone reached out to her? A quick glance at her smartphone revealed no new messages. Returning downstairs, Buddy waited by the front door, fixated on her as if demanding his collar and leash. "Want to go for a walk, Buddy?" she asked softly, though her priority was to find her family first. At that moment, her phone rang, displaying her mother's name. With a sigh of relief, Carol answered. "Mom, I'm here at the house, but where is everyone? Martha's voice, cheerful and unruffled, resonated over the call, accompanied by the sounds of waves and distant laughter. Confused, Carol switched to video call. On the screen, she saw her parents and Diana standing on the deck of a cruise ship, all clad in sunglasses and sunscreen. In unison they shouted, "Surprise!" Carol's confusion swiftly gave way to anger as she realized what was happening. "What's going on?" she demanded. With palpable excitement, Martha announced, "We're off on a 2-week cruise in the Caribbean. Diana found a great discount, and since you're always tied up with work, we didn't want to disturb you." Struggling to process the revelation, Carol pressed further. "So you decided to leave without telling me? Who arranged this family trip?" Martha's tone wavered slightly before she explained. "Actually, we needed you to take care of Buddy. Dogs aren't allowed on cruise ships, and we knew he'd despise a pet hotel." Diana added with a laugh on video, "Don't worry, we'll bring you a special gift." Carol was left speechless. This was her family, always making decisions for their own convenience and expecting her to adjust accordingly. "Just when will you be back?" Carol finally asked. "In 2 weeks. Martha replied happily, adding, "I've emailed you all the details. Buddy's food is stocked, and he needs walks twice a day. Oh, and Mrs. Jones next door will check in on him occasionally." Gazing down at Buddy's innocent eyes and wagging tail, Carol took a deep breath. "All right then, have a good time," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "You're always so dependable," Martha cooed before ending the call. As the video faded, Carol sank onto the sofa, and Buddy curled his head onto her lap. "It's just you and me now, Buddy," she whispered, though a torrent of anger and betrayal churned within her. Rising with newfound resolve, Carol walked to the bookshelf in the living room as if guided by an unseen force. She pulled out an old file containing the house deed and scrutinized the documents that confirmed the property was jointly owned. Just then her smartphone rang again. This time Michael's cheerful voice asked, "How's it going? Has the family trip started?" Carol explained the situation, and Michael's disappointed sigh came through the phone. "That's awful. Are you coming home?" he queried. Looking out the window at Buddy faithfully by her side, Carol answered slowly, "No, I need some time to think." Determined to take control, Carol began searching for a lawyer's number. Her extensive background in real estate had sparked an idea. Smiling at Buddy, she murmured, "Let's start a new chapter together, Buddy." His happy bark seemed to affirm her decision. Opening her laptop, Carol dove into the latest market data. There was a determined glimmer in her eyes as she whispered, "This will be our gift from the abandoned." For the next 3 days, Carol remained at her parents' house, meticulously planning her next steps. Buddy slept contentedly at her feet as soft spring sunlight bathed the Silver Lake district in a gentle glow. On a call with her longtime colleague James, a top real estate attorney in Los Angeles, Carol discussed pricing. "This is the figure I'm considering," she explained. James replied, "Since it's jointly owned, you have the legal right to move forward with the sale. Just remember, you must notify the other owners." Carol assured him, "Of course, I'll send out the notification once they return from their cruise." After ending the call, Carol gently patted Buddy's head. "Let's find a new home, Buddy." Though her apartment wasn't large, it was enough for both of them. In the long term, she envisioned a house with a yard where Buddy could run free. Slowly, she wandered through the house, a repository of over 30 years of memories. Family photos from graduations to birthday parties and anniversaries adorned the walls. In the study, Carol opened a drawer in her father's old desk and made copies of the deed, along with other important documents such as the appraisal, property tax records, and recent sale prices of nearby properties. Over the next few days, Carol prepared the house for the market. Photography sessions were arranged, and promotional materials were created with help from her professional network. While cleaning and organizing, she received a message from her mother. A smiling photo of the family against a blue sea, with the caption, "Having a wonderful time." "How's Buddy?" Carol replied succinctly, "Buddy's fine," though the image only deepened her resolve. On the 4th day, the first potential buyers arrived. A young family, the Wilsons, with 2 children aged 10 and 8. They were drawn to the spacious layout and the inviting backyard, and they fell in love with the cozy living room featuring a warm fireplace. "They'll be perfect for you, buddy," Carol whispered after they left. That same evening, she received an offer from the Wilson family, slightly above her asking price and with favorable terms designed to avoid bidding wars. Carol accepted the offer and instructed James to prepare the purchase agreement, which he managed with remarkable speed. Sitting on the sofa with Buddy, Carol reflected, "This feels like the right decision." The following day, she began sorting through the house's mementos, packing away personal items, childhood photos, and keepsakes into boxes. The remaining family belongings were organized into clearly labeled boxes and stored in a nearby rental unit, awaiting their return. Holding an old photo album filled with rare images of her and Diana sharing happier moments, Carol hesitated before tucking it away in her own box. As the closing date approached, Carol braced herself for a fresh start. Soon, she would be living in her modest condominium with Buddy by her side, leaving behind a lifetime of memories to forge a future on her own terms. Carol confirmed a pet-friendly policy and purchased a new bed and dishes for Buddy. Almost daily, Martha sent photos and messages. "Coming home soon. Can't wait to be back." But Carol read them without replying, instead focusing on the sale proceedings. The day before closing, the final documents were completed. In James's office, Carol signed and arranged to hand over the keys to the Wilson family. Though she appeared calm, a whirl of complex emotions churned inside her. This wasn't merely an act of revenge, it was reclaiming her life. "We're moving tomorrow," she told Buddy, whose tail wagged in response. The following morning, Carol paid a final visit to her parents' bedroom. She left a small card on the pillow that read, "A gift from the abandoned." Her phone then rang with a message from her mother. "Coming home tomorrow. Can you pick us up at the airport?" Carol read the message silently and, without replying, placed another card on the kitchen table detailing the address of the storage facility where her parents' and Diana's belongings were kept, along with an invoice for the retrieval fees. She chuckled softly at noon. Standing at the front door with Buddy on his leash, Carol watched as the Wilson family's car appeared. They had come to receive the keys to their new home. "Mrs. Hamilton, thank you so much," Mrs. Wilson said with a smile while her husband and their 2 children waited in the car. "This house will be the place for our new beginning. It's perfect for our family," they added. Carol handed over the keys and said, "Please take good care of it," Mrs. Wilson promised as she glanced around the house and garden, remarking, "It's the ideal spot for our children to grow up." Carol then walked to her car with Buddy, pausing to look back one last time. "There's sentimentality here, but no regret, Buddy. Our new life begins now." Climbing into the car, she took a deep breath, checked the folder containing the title transfer documents, the storage contract, and all evidence of her plan, and then started the engine. In her rearview mirror, she watched the Wilson family enter the house, their children running around excitedly, as a new chapter of memories began. Later that day, Carol arrived at her apartment with Buddy and her essentials. Her cozy, clean apartment, bright and just big enough for Buddy, offered a view of downtown Los Angeles. "Our castle, Buddy, at least for now," she mused. That evening at dinner, Carol recounted everything to Michael, who listened with surprise and supportive understanding. "I'd love to see their reaction when they get back," Michael joked. Carol smiled wryly. "I don't want to see it, but I can imagine it." Later, as she lay in bed with Buddy, a rare sense of peace settled over her. After their 2-week Caribbean cruise, a taxi carrying Martha, George, and Diana pulled into the quiet Silver Lake neighborhood. Their faces were tanned and relaxed, suitcases laden with souvenirs, a reminder of a wonderful vacation. "Thank you for your connections," Martha said appreciatively. Diana, beaming with pride, remarked, "That's the advantage of working at a travel agency." Yet a note of concern lingered in Martha's voice about Carol. "I feel a bit bad about Carol," she admitted. "But she'll understand. We even bought her that special souvenir." George added, "I'm worried we haven't heard from her. She's always busy." Martha shrugged. "She's probably had her hands full with Buddy." When they reached the house, George tried his key in the door. It wouldn't turn. Martha attempted as well, with the same result. "Has the lock been changed?" Diana asked, puzzled. George pressed the doorbell and after a moment the door opened. Instead of Buddy or Carol, a stranger, a woman with 2 curious children, greeted them. "Hello, can I help you?" the woman asked with a smile. Martha, momentarily speechless, insisted. "This is our house." The woman replied, "I'm sorry, but we purchased this house last week." George stepped forward, incredulous. "There must be some mistake. This has been our home for over 30 years. "Just a moment," the woman said, calling someone. A middle-aged man, Robert, appeared and said quietly, "You must be the Hamilton family. We are the Wilsons. We bought this house from Carol Hamilton last week." Martha's voice rose. "That's impossible. She can't have done this." Robert explained, "According to our lawyer and all the necessary checks, Carol had full rights as a joint owner." Stunned, Diana finally asked, "Where's Buddy?" Mrs. Wilson replied, "Carol took him with her. He's her dog." The color drained from their faces. George, trembling, asked, "May we come inside?" The Wilsons exchanged glances and reluctantly agreed. Inside, they found some furniture remaining but rearranged. New paintings adorned the walls, and all their family photos were gone. Toys were scattered on the floor, evidence of a new family presence. "I can't believe this was our home," Robert observed. "It's a wonderful place, our children love it," added Mrs. Wilson. Martha roamed the living room and discovered her prized porcelain collection was missing. Diana dashed upstairs to find that her old room had been transformed into a vibrant children's playroom. George headed to the study, only to find his cherished fishing gear and books had vanished. "Where are our belongings?" he asked. The Wilsons explained that an envelope had been left on the kitchen table. Rushing there, Martha opened it to reveal the address of a storage facility, an invoice for retrieval fees, and a small card reading, "A gift from the abandoned." "What does this mean?" Diana asked, confusion in her eyes. After a long silence, George murmured, "Because we were left behind." In the entrance hall, the Wilsons waited awkwardly. Martha finally asked, "Did she have the right to sell the house?" Mr. Wilson produced folded papers. "This is a copy of the purchase agreement Carol Hamilton signed as a joint owner. All legal procedures were properly followed." With trembling hands, Martha read the document and her face paled further as she saw that Carol's name was even included in her father's will. Gathering in the living room once more, Martha found another message left in the master bedroom. "Meet me at the lawyer's office tomorrow at 11. Address attached." Tearfully, Diana asked, "What should we do? Where will we live now that our belongings are gone?" George, exhausted, replied, "We'll have to find a hotel for now. Tomorrow we'll meet with Carol and talk." The Wilsons offered them water and chairs, and as they sat in the living room, Diana's phone buzzed with a message from Carol. Martha and George watched as Diana read aloud, "Your belongings are in storage. Details about the retrieval fee will follow from the lawyer. Buddy is with me, he's fine." Silence fell as tears streamed down Martha's face. "What have we done?" she whispered. "Life can change in just 2 weeks," George added quietly, covering his face. Diana hesitated, then said, "Let's find a hotel and meet Carol tomorrow." With their luggage in hand, the three left the house. As the Wilsons saw them off with apologetic words, the taxi began to pull away. In the quiet ride, Martha murmured, "I always thought Carol was responsible and would never defy us." George added, "We assumed she'd never speak back." Diana remained silent, recalling the jealousy she'd felt toward Carol. So independent, so successful. Finally, as the taxi drove off, they looked back at the house where a new family now lived. "I raised you both here," Martha murmured. Diana placed her hand on her mother's shoulder. "We'll find a solution tomorrow." The taxi disappeared, and for the first time, they began to see things from Carol's perspective, realizing she had always been expected, always used, and finally left behind. "She taught us a lesson, a painful one," George said softly. Martha tried to send Carol a message but couldn't find the right words. No apology could undo their actions. The taxi headed downtown, and behind them, the house shrank into the distance as an uncertain future awaited. "Come on, Buddy," Carol called out from the spacious backyard. A year later, Buddy, a little older but still energetic, bounded over to fetch a ball from Carol's hand. Her new home, located on the west side of town, featured a small but charming garden and a convenient home office for remote work. Carol had recently established her own real estate consulting firm and even hired her first employee. That morning, breakfast was served on the terrace. Michael joined her with coffee, and their bond had grown stronger over the past year. He now often spent weekends at her place. "Are you meeting with them today?" he asked softly, and Carol nodded. Later, at lunch in a downtown cafe, the complicated relationship with her family remained evident. Since that fateful day, her parents and Diana had moved into a small apartment in West Hollywood, partly funded by the proceeds from the house sale. They managed to start anew. Martha found a part-time job at a local flower shop, George began teaching gardening classes, and Diana continued at the travel agency, albeit without the glamour of before. The first few months were fraught with bitter exchanges, but gradually communication improved. Martha sent an apologetic message. "I took you for granted. I'm sorry." Although the repair of their relationship was slow, Carol maintained firm boundaries. "My life is my own. I won't sacrifice it for your convenience," she made clear. At a subsequent lunch, the third time all four gathered, Michael asked nervously, "Is it any better now?" Carol replied quietly, "I see that you're learning." As she surveyed the backyard with Buddy basking in the sun, her phone pinged with a message from the Wilson family. A photo of their children playing in the backyard accompanied the words, "The house is wonderful. Thank you." Carol smiled unexpectedly. She had found peace. Her decision had become a path to self-liberation, an opportunity to truly begin her own life. "I'm ready to move on," she told Michael as he took her hand. "You are a strong woman," he said softly. Carol stroked Buddy and added, "I finally understand. My life is mine." Closing the door, she bid Buddy a final farewell before heading to the car with Michael. Building a new relationship with her family wouldn't be easy, but she would never again sacrifice her happiness. Sometimes the most important lessons are learned through pain, and sometimes the best gifts come from those who were once abandoned.